I feel like I shouldn't be watching. Oh my gosh.
My name is Tyler Fleet. I'm the new theater teacher here at Kettle Run, but I was not always a teacher. In fact, I spent many years working not in the traditional theater. Being in high school is an awesome experience. Really working in high school theater brings everything full circle for me. And I got involved in high school theater and I loved it. I loved being on stage. I loved being in the shows. I loved the camaraderie with all the other people in all aspects of the production. So I went to college for theater. And then one day I graduated and I had to find a job with a theater degree. But luckily I'd actually spent the summer before visiting my sister. She was at Duke down in Durham, North Carolina, and while I was living down there with her, I got a job at an amusement park, just a summer job for me, and I answered an ad in the newspaper for a costume mascot. So my interview for this job at the amusement park, I cited my reference from acting school that I could also juggle and do magic and eat fire. And so the boss there, he said, oh, well, that's great. While you're here, you can just do your magic and juggling show here at the amusement park. And I thought, my show? Well, I didn't really have a show. You know, I was a teenager, and I put together a little show that I showed the boss. And he said, that's good. So you can do that here. And I actually did it 5 times a day, every day for that whole summer at the amusement parks. I ended up in Coney Island one day, and I'd had some guest lecturers in my classes from Coney Island that worked at the Coney Island Circus Sideshow. It's one of the last remaining real live stage performing circus sideshows left in America. So when I was walking through Coney Island, I knocked on the door of the Coney Island Circus Sideshow just to kind of see what it was all about. And the boss came down, Dick Ziggin, and he met me at the door, and I said, hey, you know, I'm Tyler Fire, and I can eat fire, and I can do magic, and I can walk on stilts, and I can juggle, and I'm looking for a job. And I was young, and I thought this was all pretty cool at the time, you know, and the boss just checked it all off on his fingers, you know, and he said, well, Zenobia juggles machetes, and we don't need a stilt walker, and Frank Hartman is our master of magic, and the fire god is our fire eater. But did you say you could do anything else? Because we don't need anything. Oh, wait, we need an outside talker. Can you do that? And as I'm shaking his hand saying, yes, of course I can, I'm thinking to myself, what's the outside talker do again? So the boss comes out and he hands me the microphone and he says, oh, good, you're here. Here, well, let's get on stage and see what you can do. So my job was to bring people into the sideshow and get them to buy tickets to watch the show inside. A lot of our audience in Coney Island was a native, urban New York City crowd, many of whom had never seen a live stage show of any kind. They don't go to Broadway, it's too expensive. They don't go to see their school's kids' pageants. My roommate was Frank Hartman. He was the fire eater and the sword swallower inside. So one day, Frank started to get a little bit older, and Frank met a girl, and he decided to retire. And the boss told him he could leave as soon as he replaced himself in the show, which meant he had to teach me how to swallow swords. Turns out it took 3 years for me to learn how to swallow swords. So I worked at Coney Island for 7 years. We used to do 16 shows a day, 6 days a week. It ends up being kind of a lot of shows. But while I was there, living and working in New York City and being young and excited, I said yes every time the phone rang. And the phone started to ring more and more. And I started to get some pretty cool calls. And I got to play Radio City Music Hall when I was young, and that was really fun. And I got to do some TV commercials. But after 7 years and thousands and thousands and thousands of shows there, I decided to move on to another show and doing nightclub performances. And I got to do a lot of celebrity birthday parties, which was kind of fun. I remember doing Wendy Williams' birthday party because while I was at Wendy Williams' birthday party swallowing swords, I looked out and saw the cast of Saturday Night Live watching my show, which was kind of a fun moment. And then I'm there in this crowded New York City nightclub. I was only on for 5 minutes, and then I'm done, and I've got this giant sword board here that I've got to then squeeze through the crowd and get back to my dressing room. Well, there's no room to squeeze through a crowded room of people, and I see this big, long arm reach out and just part the seas and make way for me to go by. And when I get to the end of this arm and I get to the man behind it, I see it's P. Diddy. And I'm face to face with P. Diddy, and he says, hey kid, nice show. And the beginning of 2006, I went on another tour in February called Burlescapades in Loveland. It was a dancing girl show, and I was the MC, so I would introduce all the dance acts, and I would tell some jokes in between. I got to eat fire and swallow swords, and I had a lot of friends on the show, so it was really fun. We also had a live band on the show. Performing with a live band with dance acts, it's a magical experience. So I was having the time of my life out on this tour, and we played this place in Alexandria, Virginia, where I'd never been before, called the Birchmere, right? We had a great show. It was a great night. It was Valentine's Day. So after the show, I go out to the bar to look around, see if I can have some fun, and I look over, and there's this girl in a red dress. She's the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. So I start walking over to her table, and right as I get there, I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to say. She says, "Hi, Tyler," and I'm just dumbstruck. I can't think of anything. So how does she know my name? Have I met her before? I've never been to this town before. I would remember meeting this girl. And it doesn't occur to me that I've been the MC of the entire show, and I have told everyone my name probably a dozen times. So anyhow, I got to talking with her, and she was there talent scouting some of the dancing girls on that show for a new variety arts venue, a new stage that she was opening in Washington, D.C. So I kept in touch with this girl. I was on tour for the rest of the whole year, but I found that every time I got a day off, I wasn't flying back home to New York City. I was flying to Washington, D.C. So I met my wife on Valentine's Day in 2006. She lived in Washington, D.C. and was working on a venue there. So since I spent most of the year on tour, I figured I could live anywhere. And I moved down from New York to D.C. to be with her and work on this new theater called the Palace of Wonders on 8th Street. We got married a year later on Valentine's Day by Elvis in Vegas, and we put out our own show on the road the next summer, which was the Lucky Daredevil Thrill Show. Well, at the end of our 4th year touring that same show, kind of like a band playing the same album for 4 years, we kind of felt like we'd played that show as much as we wanted to. We wanted to write a new album, but the album we really wanted to write was having a family. So we decided to get serious about having kids, and that would mean coming off the road for a little while, which for me had been many years, so we didn't know what to do. So I started thinking about it. Well, what was I qualified to do as a real job in the world anymore? I built sets and shows, but I'd have to move back to New York City for that. I'd run lighting and sound for shows, but I'd have to move back to New York City for that. We've been living in a little cabin up in West Virginia, and we kind of liked living up in the mountains after being on tour in all the cities for so long. So we decided to stay there. I said, well, I have this theater degree, so maybe I could get a job teaching theater. I'm going to swallow a very special sword for you, and the first thing I need you to do is take hold of the sword yourself and examine it for yourself and for all of us. A lot of people seem to think there's some kind of trickery involved in the sword itself. I'll give you a couple things you can look for, things people say to me all the time. They say there's a button on the handle that makes the blade fold up.
No.
You're going to be great. That was fantastic. Can you see what I had for lunch here in the cafeteria today? I'm just teasing you. You've been such a good sport. Thanks so much for letting me talk to you.